The stars do not remember us. This is the first truth every child of the Vithari Dominion learns before they learn to walk, before they learn to speak, before they learn the names of their parents or the warmth of their world's twin suns. The stars burn in silence. They watched our ancestors crawl from primordial seas. They watched us build our first temples, our first starships, our first empires that stretched across 1,000 systems. And they will watch unmoved and eternal when the last of us draws our final breath and our civilization becomes nothing more than archaeology for species yet unborn. I am Kethavoran Salath, and I have lived for 417 standard cycles. In that time, I have served as ambassador, as fleet admiral, as counselor to 3 successive hierarchs. I have witnessed the rise and fall of 17 lesser species. I have walked on worlds so ancient that their original names have been forgotten by the very beings who still inhabit them. I have seen wonders that would shatter the comprehension of younger minds. And now, as I stand aboard the observation deck of the last diplomatic vessel our dying dominion can spare, watching the cold blue light of a distant star grow larger in the viewport, I find myself thinking about what I have never seen. I have never seen my people beg. Until today. The ship shuddered as we dropped from faster-than-light transit, and I steadied myself against the viewport railing with 3 of my 4 arms. The journey from what remained of Vithari space had taken 11 days. 11 days of running silent through dead systems, past the burned husks of worlds that had been thriving colonies mere months ago, through fields of debris that had once been proud fleets carrying billions of souls. My aide, Thesson, approached from behind. I could hear her footsteps, uneven and exhausted. She had lost her entire family in the siege of Korith Prime. Her mate, her children, her parents and their parents before them. 7 generations of her bloodline, erased in the span of a single planetary rotation. "Ambassador," she said, and I could hear the hollow emptiness in her voice that had become so common among our people. "We have received initial contact response from the human station. And they have granted us docking permissions. They are welcoming us." I turned to face her. Fessen's scales had lost their luster, a sign of severe stress in our species, of a body beginning to consume itself from grief and malnutrition. Her eyes, once bright amber, had faded to a dull yellow. She looked ancient, though she was barely 60 cycles old.
"Welcoming us?" I repeated.
"Yes, Ambassador. Their exact words were—" She consulted her data tablet, and I saw her brow ridge furrow in confusion. "Come on in. Coffee's hot, and we've cleared a bay for your ship. Take your time on approach, no rush." I did not know what coffee was. I did not know why they would specify the temperature of any beverage, and I certainly did not understand why they would tell us to take our time, when every hour brought news of another fallen world, another billion dead, another fragment of our civilization crumbling to dust. But then I reminded myself, the humans did not know. They did not know because we had never told them. We had never considered them worth telling. 300 cycles ago, when the humans first emerged from their single, unremarkable world in an unremarkable system, in an unremarkable spiral arm of the galaxy, the Dominion had taken notice. Briefly. A council session had been convened,
A report had been filed, and a decision had been reached with the casual efficiency of an empire that had seen 100 species rise and fade. The humans were classified as primitive, but promising. They had achieved spaceflight. They had rudimentary faster-than-light capability. They had colonized a handful of worlds within their immediate stellar neighborhood, and they had, like so many young species before them, sent out eager signals of greeting and friendship into the cosmos.
The Dominion's response had been to establish a buffer zone around human space, not out of fear, the very notion was laughable, out of disinterest. We were dealing with the Crethval incursion at the time, a minor border conflict that had consumed our attention for a few decades. By the time it was resolved, the humans had been largely forgotten.
They were, we assumed, doing what all young species did, expanding slowly, fighting amongst themselves, building their small monuments to their small gods, unaware that the galaxy around them moved on without notice or care.
We had not spoken to them.
We had not monitored them.
We had not, in 400 years, considered them worthy of a single diplomatic overture. And now, with our civilization burning and our enemies at the gates of our final strongholds, we had come to them with our hands extended and our pride in ashes. Because they were the only ones left.
The human station was called Waypoint 7. It was not impressive.
I did not know what I had expected. Grand spires, perhaps, gleaming towers of metal and light. The young species always built monuments to themselves when they first took to the stars. Declarations of existence, screaming into the void, "We are here. We matter." Waypoint 7 was none of these things. It was functional, utilitarian, a collection of interconnected modules and docking arms arranged in a practical pattern that prioritized efficiency over aesthetics. There were no ornamental features, no proclamations of grandeur. The hull was marked with patches and repairs, evidence of a structure that had been maintained and modified over decades of continuous use. It looked, I thought uncharitably, like something we might have built in our early industrial era, before we learned that architecture was a form of power projection. But then, as our ship maneuvered closer, I noticed something that gave me pause. The docking arms were standardized, modular, designed to accommodate a variety of ship configurations without modification. The approach corridors were wide and clearly marked, not for human vessels, but for vessels of any design. The station's orientation was positioned to allow easy access from multiple approach vectors. Waypoint 7 was not built to impress. It was built to receive.
"Ambassador," Fesson said, her voice tight with something I couldn't quite identify. "Our sensors are detecting significant traffic in this system."
Traffic. Human vessels. Hundreds of them. Perhaps thousands. She paused, adjusting her instruments. They're not military configurations. They appear to be cargo vessels, transport ships, mining operations. I moved to stand beside her, examining the sensor data. She was correct. The system was alive with activity, a constant flow of ships moving between stations, asteroid installations, orbital platforms. It was the bustle of an economy in motion, of a civilization going about its daily business. It was so normal that it felt alien. When had the Dominion last known a day without war? When had our shipping lanes carried anything but refugees and military supplies? I could not remember. The hierarchy had been fighting the absence for so long that peace itself had become a foreign concept. And the humans simply lived. The docking procedure was flawless.
I had expected delays, confusion, the fumbling incompetence of a species unaccustomed to receiving alien vessels. Instead, we were guided in by calm professional voices that adjusted seamlessly to our ship's communication protocols. The docking clamps engaged without incident. The airlock cycled with atmospheric specifications calibrated to our biological requirements within seconds of our ship transmitting them. When the inner door opened, 3 humans were waiting for us. They were smaller than I had expected. The Vaethari stand nearly 3 meters tall, with 4 arms and scales that shift color with our emotional state. The humans barely reached my lower chest. They had no natural armor, no obvious weapons, no physical features that would mark them as apex predators. They looked soft, fragile, the kind of creatures that should have been prey on any evolutionary tree. And yet they did not flinch when we emerged from our vessel. They did not gawk or stare. They simply waited, their expressions calm and patient, as if receiving alien diplomats from a species they had never met was entirely routine. The one in the center stepped forward. She was female by human standards, shorter than the others, with close-cropped silver hair and lines around her eyes that suggested age and experience. Her uniform was as plain as the station, gray fabric, practical pockets, no insignia of rank that I could identify. "Ambassador Kethvorin," she said, and I was startled to hear my name pronounced correctly. "I'm Director Chen. Welcome to Waypoint 7. I understand you've had a difficult journey." I felt Tessin stiffen beside me. A difficult journey. As if we had been delayed by traffic, rather than fleeing through the graveyard of our civilization. "Thank you, Director," I replied, forcing diplomatic courtesy into my voice. "Your hospitality is appreciated." "Let's get you settled," she said. "Your crew will be escorted to quarters. We've prepared accommodations suited to your environmental needs, food and medical supplies if you need them. You and your aide can accompany me to the reception area, and we can talk." Talk. Such a simple word, as if what I had come to say could be contained in casual conversation. But I nodded, and I followed. The interior of Waypoint 7 matched its exterior, functional, unpretentious, clean. The corridors were wide enough for species larger than humans to pass comfortably, and I noticed subtle design choices that suggested forethought. Textured flooring that would accommodate various foot structures, lighting that could be adjusted across multiple spectrums, signage that used universal mathematical symbols alongside human script. The reception area was a large room with curved windows looking out into space. Simple furniture had been arranged around a central table, and someone had placed a collection of containers on its surface, bottles of various liquids, dishes of what I assumed were human foods. "Please," Director Chen said, gesturing to the seating. "I wasn't sure what your species preferred for refreshment, so we prepared a variety. If none of it suits you, just let us know. We can synthesize most organic compounds." I settled into one of the larger chairs, noting that it adjusted automatically to my body configuration. Tessin remained standing, her posture rigid with tension. "Director Chen," I began, "I appreciate your courtesy, but I must be direct. I have not come here for refreshment or rest. I have come because you're at war," she said quietly, "and you're losing." The words struck me like a physical blow. For a moment, I could not speak. I could only stare at this small, soft creature who had just spoken aloud the truth that my people had been choking on for months. "How do you know this?" Tessin demanded, stepping forward. "We have told no one. Our communications are encrypted with—" "Tessin," I raised a hand to calm her, but my hearts were racing. "Director, how do you know?" Chen reached for one of the bottles on the table and poured a dark liquid into a small cup.
The aroma that rose from it was rich and bitter. This, I realized, must be the coffee that had been mentioned.
"Ambassador," she said, "space is large, but it's not infinite. Signals travel, ships pass through, refugees flee in every direction." She took a sip of her drink. "We've been tracking the situation in your region for the past 18 months. We know about the entity you call the Absence. We know about the fall of the Outer Reaches, the siege of Koreth Prime, the battle of the Veiled Stars."
We know that your hierarchy has lost approximately 60% of its territory and an estimated 4 billion citizens. Thesson made a sound, something between a gasp and a sob. 4 billion. The numbers spoken aloud by this stranger made it real in a way that our own internal reports never had.
"You have been watching," I said slowly, "for 18 months?"
We watch everything, Ambassador. Chen's voice was gentle, but there was something beneath it, something I could not quite identify. It's how small species survive in a large galaxy. Small species. The phrase should have been absurd. The humans had less than 50 systems under their control. The Dominion, even in its diminished state, still held over 200. By every metric of galactic power, we dwarfed them. And yet she said it without irony, without bitterness, as a simple statement of fact. "Then you know why I am here," I said. "I can guess." She set down her cup. "You've tried everyone else. The Collective refused. The Syndicate retreated behind their borders. The Conclave is too fractured to respond. And the Dominion, in 400 years, never established diplomatic relations with us." She smiled, a strange expression that I would later learn indicated a complex mix of emotions in humans. "We're not your first choice, Ambassador. We're your only choice." I should have been offended. I should have risen from my seat and delivered a scathing rebuke for her presumption, her impertinence, her failure to show proper respect to a representative of an elder civilization. Instead, I felt something crack inside me, a dam that had been holding since the first reports came in from Koreth Prime, since I watched the sensor feeds of our grand fleet being consumed by the void, since I stood before the hierarch and accepted this mission, knowing that it was built on desperation and shame. "Yes," I whispered, "you are our only choice." Thesson turned away, her scales flushing dark with humiliation. But Director Chen did not gloat. She did not smirk or show any sign of satisfaction. She simply nodded. "Tell me about the Absence," she said. "Tell me everything." And so I told her. I told her about the first contact, the colony world of Thessar 4, which had gone silent without warning. How we had sent a patrol fleet to investigate, and how that fleet had vanished. How the next fleet had been larger, better armed, and how it too had been swallowed by the darkness. I told her about the Absence itself, the entity, the phenomenon, the horror that defied every attempt at classification. It was not a species in any sense we understood. It did not communicate. It did not negotiate. It did not seem to want anything except expansion. It moved through space like a cancer, consuming everything in its path, stars, planets, stations, ships, people, and leaving nothing behind but void. I told her about the battles, the desperate attempts to establish defensive lines, the weapons we deployed. Each more devastating than the last, none of them effective for long. The Absence adapted. It learned. Every tactic we used against it worked exactly once, and then never again. I told her about the refugees, the billions who fled before the advancing darkness, crowding into the core worlds, overwhelming our infrastructure.
dying in transit when their ships ran out of fuel or food or hope. I told her about Korath Prime, where my own sister had commanded the final defensive fleet. 1,700 warships, the pride of the Dominion. They had held for 6 hours, and then they were gone, and my sister with them, and the planet they had died to protect had followed within the day. I told her about the mathematical projections. At current rates of expansion, the absence would reach the core systems within 4 months. The hierarchy would fall within 6. Within a year, there would be nothing left of the Vathari Dominion but debris and memory. Throughout my account, Director Chen listened. She did not interrupt. She did not express shock or horror or disbelief. She simply listened, her dark eyes fixed on mine, her expression unreadable. When I finished, silence hung between us for a long moment. "Thank you, Ambassador," she said finally. "I know that wasn't easy to share." "I have laid bare the death of my civilization," I replied. "I have told you that we are helpless, that we are dying, that we have come to you, a species we ignored for centuries, to beg for salvation." I felt my voice crack. "Easy? Director, there is nothing easy about any of this." "No," she agreed, "there isn't." She rose from her seat and walked to the window, looking out at the stars. "Ambassador, I need to ask you something, and I need you to answer honestly." "Ask." "In 400 years, your Dominion never reached out to us, never offered trade, alliance, communication of any kind. We sent signals, we sent probes, we even, once, sent a diplomatic vessel to your border." She turned to face me. "It was destroyed. Your patrol craft fired on it without warning or communication. 17 human lives lost." I felt my scales flush with shame. I did not know this." "No, your government never considered it significant enough to report." Chen's voice remained calm, but I could see something flickering in her eyes. Old pain, carefully controlled. "Ambassador, my grandmother was on that ship. She was a linguist. She had spent 30 years studying alien communication patterns, hoping that one day she would get to use that knowledge. She believed, truly believed, that the galaxy was full of wonders, and that all we had to do was reach out." I could not speak. What could I possibly say? My mother was 7 years old when she learned that her mother was never coming home, that she had been killed by aliens who considered her so insignificant that they didn't even bother to send a message explaining why. "Director Chen." "I'm not telling you this to make you feel guilty, Ambassador." Chen turned back to the window. "I'm telling you because I need you to understand something. Humanity has known for a very long time that the galaxy is not a friendly place. We have known that we are small and weak and alone. We have known that there are powers out there that could destroy us without a second thought." She faced me again, and now I saw something in her expression that I hadn't seen before. Something hard, something old. So we prepared. The next hours were a blur of meetings, negotiations, and communications. Director Chen had excused herself to make some calls, a phrase that seemed comically understated given the circumstances. Thesson and I were left in the reception area, attended by polite human staff who brought us food and drink and answered our questions with careful precision. I asked one of them, a young man with dark skin and kind eyes, what Director Chen had meant by prepared. He smiled. It was not a threatening smile, but something about it made my scales prickle with unease. "Humanity has a saying, Ambassador," he said. "Hope for the best, prepare for the worst. We've been hoping for a long time, but we've been preparing too." "Preparing for what?" "For everything." He would not elaborate further,
but I found myself examining the station with new eyes, noticing details I had overlooked before. The way the corridors could be sealed at multiple points, creating isolated sections. The subtle reinforcement in the walls that suggested blast-proofing. The innocuous panels that might, I suspected, conceal weapon systems. Waypoint 7 was not merely a trading post, it was a fortress dressed in civilian clothes.
How had we missed this? How had the great Vathari Dominion, with all its intelligence networks and surveillance systems, failed to notice what the humans were building in their quiet corner of the galaxy? The answer, of course, was simple. We had not looked. We had dismissed them so thoroughly that we had never bothered to look. When Chen returned, she was not alone. She was accompanied by 2 other humans, a tall man in a uniform that looked slightly more formal than hers, and a woman whose face bore the particular intensity of someone who spent their life studying complex problems.
Ambassador, Chen said, this is Admiral Marcus Webb of the United Terran Defense Force and Dr. Yuki Tanaka, our chief analyst on the absence. I stared at them. A defense force implied military capability. A chief analyst implied they had been studying the absence specifically.
You have a military, I said, and immediately felt foolish. Of course they had a military. Every species had a military.
But Admiral Webb, a large man with gray hair and a face that looked like it had been carved from stone, simply nodded. We do, Ambassador. Small by your standards, but adequate for our needs. And you have been studying the absence. Dr. Tanaka stepped forward. She was small, even for a human, with sharp eyes behind transparent lenses. For approximately 14 months, since the first refugee vessels entered the edge of our sensor range carrying survivors with stories of, well, you know better than I do what those stories contained. 14 months. I felt the room spinning around me. You have had 14 months of data, and you did not share it with us? You did not warn us?
Would you have listened? Chen asked quietly. I opened my mouth to respond, then closed it. We would not have listened. If humans had approached us with data and warnings about a threat they had not faced themselves, we would have laughed at their presumption. We would have dismissed their analysis as the fearful speculation of a primitive species trying to make itself seem important.
No, I admitted. We would not have listened.
We tried anyway, Tanaka said. 8 months ago, we sent a detailed analysis to your hierarchy through unofficial channels, trading contacts, information brokers. We don't know if it ever reached your leadership. We never received a response.
8 months. If we had received that analysis, if we had taken it seriously, could we have saved Korath Prime? Could my sister still be alive? The thought was unbearable. I pushed it away.
What have you learned? I asked. About the absence?
Tanaka exchanged a glance with Chen and Webb. Some unspoken communication passed between them.
We've learned a great deal, she said finally. We believe we understand what it is, where it came from, and how it operates. She paused. We also believe we know how to stop it.
The briefing that followed was the most surreal experience of my 400 years of life. Dr. Tanaka led us to a smaller room filled with displays and holographic projectors. As she talked, images and data streams filled the air around us. Diagrams, equations, sensor readings, trajectory analyses. Thesson, who had studied theoretical physics before entering diplomatic service, leaned forward with growing intensity as she followed the presentation. The absence, Tanaka explained, was not a single entity. It was a swarm,
Trillions upon trillions of microscopic machines, each one no larger than a grain of sand, networked together into a collective intelligence that spanned light years. It had been created, she believed, by a civilization far older than the Dominion, possibly millions of years ago, as a weapon of last resort against enemies long since forgotten.
The problem with self-replicating weapons, Tanaka said, is that they don't stop. They were designed to consume and expand, and that's what they do. Whatever targets they were originally programmed to destroy, those targets are long gone, but the machines are still following their core directives: consume, replicate, expand.
We knew it was artificial, I said slowly. Our scientists theorized as much, but we could not determine how to disrupt its coordination. Every attempt to interfere with its communication network failed.
Because you were using conventional methods, Tanaka replied. Electromagnetic jamming, directed energy attacks, nuclear pulses. Those approaches treat the swarm like a technological system. She brought up a new display, a complex web of connections that pulsed with subtle energy. But the absence doesn't communicate through technology. It communicates through quantum entanglement. Each machine is connected to every other machine across its entire network instantaneously, regardless of distance. Admiral Webb spoke up. That's its strength, Ambassador, but it's also its weakness.
How so?
Because quantum entanglement is delicate, Tanaka said. The connection between entangled particles can be disrupted by introducing specific forms of interference at the quantum level. If you know the right frequencies, the right patterns, you can collapse the entanglement network entirely. And when that happens,
the swarm loses coordination, Thesson breathed. It becomes trillions of disconnected machines, each one acting independently. Vulnerable.
Exactly. Tanaka smiled, a grim, satisfied expression. Without its network, the absence is just a cloud of dust. It can still consume, still replicate, but it can't coordinate. It can't adapt. It can't respond to threats as a unified intelligence.
And you know how to disrupt this network? I demanded. You have this weapon? The three humans exchanged another glance. Chen nodded.
We have it, she said. We've been building it for the past 6 months. We call it the Cascade.
Then deploy it. I felt myself rising from my seat, my heart's pounding with desperate hope. If you have the means to stop this horror, why are you sitting here in your station while billions die? Because it's not that simple, Ambassador. Webb's voice was calm, infuriatingly calm. The Cascade requires deployment at specific points within the absence's network. We need to get ships into the heart of the swarm, to coordinates precise enough to trigger a complete network collapse. Those ships need protection. They need support. They need... A fleet, I said. You need a fleet. We have a fleet, Chen replied, but not a large enough one to penetrate the absence's outer layers while also protecting the Cascade carriers. For that, we need allies. The word hung in the air. Allies. A word that implied partnership, equality, mutual respect. Everything the Dominion had never offered to humanity. You want us to fight beside you, I said slowly. You want what remains of our fleet to serve as a screening force while your ships deliver the killing blow. I want us to fight together, Chen corrected. Your ships protecting ours, our weapons ending the threat. A partnership, Ambassador. Perhaps the first true partnership between our species. She leaned forward. But I won't pretend that I don't see the irony. Humanity, whom you ignored for centuries, holding the key to your survival? The galaxy paying attention to us at last because you have no other choice. Director Chen, Please, she raised a hand. I don't want an apology. Apologies don't bring back my grandmother
or the 4 billion Vathari who have already died, or the countless others who will die before this is over. What I want is a decision. Will you fight with us, Ambassador? Will your hierarchy commit its remaining forces to a joint operation?
I thought of my sister, consumed by the void. I thought of Theson's family, erased from existence. I thought of my homeworld, still turning under its twin suns, still populated by beings who looked up at the sky and wondered if tomorrow would bring the darkness.
I cannot speak for the hierarchy, I said. I am only an ambassador. I do not have the authority. Then get it. Webb's voice was flat, hard. Contact your hierarch. Tell them what we've told you. And tell them this: the Cascade is ready. The fleet is ready. We can move within 48 hours, but we won't move alone and we won't wait forever. The absence won't stop its advance while your government debates procedure. Theson stepped forward. Admiral, with respect, the hierarchy's decision-making process is ancient and complex. It cannot be rushed.
Then your species is dead. Webb said it without malice, without heat, simply a statement of fact. The absence will reach your core systems in approximately 97 days. If we launch within 48 hours, we have a 73% chance of successfully deploying the Cascade before that happens. Every day we delay reduces those odds by approximately 2%. In 5 weeks, the probability of success drops below 50%. He wet my eyes.
We will not sacrifice human lives on a gamble, Ambassador. If your hierarchy cannot decide in time, we will retreat to defended positions and watch the absence consume your worlds. We will survive. Will you?
The silence that followed was absolute.
I contacted the hierarchy that night.
The communication was fragmented, delayed by the destruction of relay stations across our territory. When the hierarch's image finally resolved on my display, I barely recognized them. Hierarch Veth Solon had always been a figure of commanding presence, tall, proud, scales gleaming with the iridescent patterns of our highest nobility. The being who stared at me now was a shadow, exhausted, hollowed, old.
Ambassador Kethvorin, the hierarch said. Your report.
I told them everything. The humans' knowledge of our situation, their 14 months of analysis, their understanding of the absence, the Cascade weapon, the fleet standing ready, the ultimatum.
When I finished, the hierarch was silent for a long moment.
They truly have this weapon? They asked finally. Is this not a deception, a manipulation?
I have seen their data, hierarch. My aide, Theson, has reviewed their scientific analysis. Their understanding of the absence exceeds our own. Their conclusions are sound. And they demand our fleet, our remaining ships placed under their command.
Not their command, I corrected carefully. Joint command, a partnership. They are asking for allies, hierarch, not servants.
Another long silence. When the hierarch spoke again, their voice was heavy with something I had never heard before. Shame.
We dismissed them, Kethvoron. For 400 years we treated them as beneath our notice, and now they stand as our only hope. They let out a sound that might have been a laugh or a sob. The irony is almost poetic. The galaxy has a cruel sense of humor.
Hierarch, there is no time for...
I know. Veth Solon straightened, and for a moment I saw a flash of the leader they had once been. You have my authority, Ambassador. Commit our remaining forces to this alliance. Whatever the humans require, grant it. Whatever terms they demand, accept them. I felt my heart skip.
Hierarch, the council.
The council is scattered. Half of them are dead, and the other half are more concerned with preserving their family estates than preserving our species. I am the hierarch. My word is law. They leaned closer to the display. Do whatever you must to save our people, Kethferon. Whatever it costs, whatever it takes. This is my final command to you. Final. The word echoed in my mind. Final.
Hierarch, I said carefully, your phrasing concerns me.
The absence is 3 days from the homeworld, Vethsolan said quietly. Our remaining orbital defenses will not hold for more than a few hours. I am ordering a general evacuation, but... They shook their head. There are not enough ships. There will never be enough ships.
Then come with them. Board a vessel. Retreat to... No. The hierarch's voice was firm. The hierarch does not flee. When the darkness comes for our homeworld, I will be standing on the surface, looking up at the sky, as our ancestors did when they first dreamed of the stars. They smiled, a sad, peaceful expression. Besides, Ambassador, if you succeed, you will not need me. And if you fail, it will not matter where I am. I wanted to argue. I wanted to scream that this was madness, that we needed them, that they could not simply give up. But looking at their face, seeing the exhaustion, the acceptance, the strange tranquility of someone who had made peace with their own death, I understood.
The hierarch had already won their final battle, the battle against despair.
I will not fail, I said. I know you won't. Vethsolan's image flickered as another relay station died somewhere in the darkness. Go, Ambassador, save our people. And when this is over, when the absence is defeated and the galaxy is whole again, remember us. Remember what we were and what we could have been. The connection severed. The display went dark. And I sat alone in the quarters the humans had provided, and I wept. Director Chen found me an hour later. She did not knock, the door simply opened, and she walked in carrying 2 cups of the dark liquid she called coffee. She set one on the table beside me and settled into a chair across the room. The caffeine won't affect your biochemistry, she said, but the warmth might be soothing. Humans find it comforting to hold something warm when we're grieving. I looked at her. You knew. We intercepted the end of your communication. We weren't trying to spy. Your encryption is easy to decode, and we were monitoring for tactical intelligence. She shrugged. I'm sorry about your hierarch. They sound like they were a good leader. They were. I picked up the cup, feeling its warmth against my scales. She was right. It was oddly comforting. They gave me full authority to commit our forces. Whatever you require. I know, we heard that part too. Chen sipped her own coffee. I've already notified Admiral Webb. He's coordinating with your fleet commanders now. We'll be ready to launch in 36 hours. 36 hours. In 36 hours, we would march into the heart of the absence, and we would either save the galaxy or die trying. Director Chen, I said slowly, may I ask you something? Of course. Why are you helping us? She raised an eyebrow. Excuse me? You have every reason to hate us. We ignored you for centuries. We killed your grandmother. We treated your species as insignificant, unworthy of notice. I gestured at the room around us. You built all of this, your stations, your fleets, your weapons, without our assistance, without our knowledge, without our permission. You could have remained silent. You could have let the absence consume us and retreated to your defended positions, as Admiral Webb suggested. Why risk human lives to save a civilization that never showed you anything but contempt?
Chen was quiet for a long moment. When she spoke, her voice was soft. Ambassador, do you know how humanity became a spacefaring species?
I assume the standard developmental pattern. Fossil fuels, atmospheric pollution, early nuclear experimentation, gradual... No, she shook her head. I mean, yes, all of that happened, but that's not why we reached the stars. We reached the stars because we nearly destroyed ourselves, and we decided not to.
I waited, saying nothing. 300 years before we achieved faster-than-light travel, we came within hours of nuclear annihilation. Not once, multiple times. Our nations pointed weapons at each other that could have sterilized our planet, and we came so close to using them that it's a miracle we survived. Chen's eyes were distant, looking at something I couldn't see. And then, slowly, we started to change. We built international institutions. We developed global communication networks. We learned, painfully and imperfectly, that our survival depended on cooperation.
You unified. Not exactly. We still argue. We still have conflicts, disagreements, different nations with different interests. But we learned that there are some things more important than our differences. Survival, preservation, the continuation of our species and our values into the future. She met my eyes. The absence threatens all of that, Ambassador. Not just your people, ours too. If it consumes the Dominion, it will be stronger, larger, harder to stop. Eventually, it will come for us.
Maybe not today, maybe not for decades, but eventually.
So this is self-interest.
Partly, she smiled, but not entirely. Ambassador, humanity has spent 3 centuries looking up at the stars and wondering if we were alone. We sent signals. We listened for responses. We hoped, desperately, naively hoped, that the universe was full of life and that other species would be like us, curious, compassionate, eager to learn and share and grow together.
We disappointed you.
You ignored us, which honestly was better than some of the alternatives we imagined. She laughed, a strange, rueful sound. But here's the thing, Ambassador. Just because the galaxy disappointed us doesn't mean we have to become the disappointment. We can still be what we hoped the universe would be. We can still offer compassion where none was shown to us. We can still reach out, even when our hands have been slapped away.
That seems impractical.
Probably. Humans are notoriously impractical when it comes to our ideals. Chen finished her coffee and set down the cup. But here's what I believe, Ambassador. I believe that the universe is exactly as cruel as we allow it to be. Every time we choose compassion over convenience, cooperation over conquest, hope over cynicism, we make the universe a little less cruel, one decision at a time, one generation at a time. She stood. You asked why we're helping you. That's why.
Because helping each other is what we're supposed to do, and because someone has to go first. She walked to the door, then paused and looked back. Get some rest, Ambassador. Tomorrow we start saving the galaxy. I did not rest. I could not. Instead, I wandered the corridors of Waypoint 7, observing the humans as they prepared for war. And what I saw reshaped everything I thought I knew about their species. They were not chaotic. Every movement, every action, every conversation was part of a larger pattern, a choreography of efficiency that rivaled anything the Dominion had ever achieved. Supplies were loaded onto ships with mechanical precision. Weapons systems were tested and rechecked. Crews ran drills and simulations, their faces calm and focused.
But it was not just the efficiency that struck me. It was the way they spoke to each other. In the Dominion, military operations were conducted through hierarchy and obedience. Commanders gave orders, subordinates obeyed. There was no room for discussion, for questioning, for individual initiative. The machine worked because every part knew its place.
The humans operated differently. I watched a young officer challenge a senior admiral's tactical assessment, not rudely, but directly, presenting alternative analysis with calm confidence. I watched the admiral listen, consider, and then modify the plan based on the officer's input. I watched a maintenance crew identify a potential flaw in a ship's systems and halt the entire departure sequence until it was resolved, overriding the protests of the captain himself.
They argued, they debated, they questioned everything. And somehow, impossibly, it made them stronger.
They call it distributed decision-making, Thassan said, appearing beside me as I watched a group of pilots discussing flight formations. I've been reading their historical archives. They developed the concept during their early industrial era, when factory managers realized that workers on the ground often understood problems better than executives in distant offices.
"It seems inefficient," I said.
It is, initially, but over time it produces better outcomes. More resilient systems, fewer catastrophic failures caused by single points of error. She paused. The Dominion's command structure failed at Koreth Prime, Ambassador. The fleet admiral made a tactical decision based on incomplete information, and no one had the authority to challenge him. By the time his error became apparent, it was too late. I thought of my sister, following orders to her death. Following orders that might have been wrong. The humans have been living in a universe that wanted to kill them from the moment they climbed down from the trees, Thesson continued. Their predators were faster, stronger, better armed. Their climate shifted randomly. Their diseases evolved to exploit their weaknesses. They survived not because they were the strongest or the fastest, but because they were the most adaptable. They learned to learn, Ambassador. It's embedded in their culture, their institutions, their very psychology.
And you learned all of this from their historical archives?
I learned it from watching them. She turned to face me. Ambassador, I have served the Dominion for 60 years. I have always believed that our civilization represented the pinnacle of galactic development. Our technology, our culture, our wisdom accumulated over millennia. She shook her head. I was wrong. The humans have been a spacefaring species for less than 4 centuries, and they have already surpassed us in ways we never imagined.
Their weapons.
It's not their weapons. Thesson's voice was intense. It's the way they think. They treat every problem as solvable, every challenge as an opportunity to learn. They fail constantly. Their history is a catalog of disasters, mistakes, catastrophes that should have destroyed them. But they never stop trying. They never stop adapting. They never, ever give up. She took a breath, steadying herself. The absence is an adaptive threat. That's why our weapons failed. Every tactic we used, it learned from and countered. We approached it as a military problem, and we lost. The humans approached it as a puzzle. They studied it. They learned its patterns. They found its weakness. She looked at me with something like wonder. They're going to win, Ambassador. I don't know how I know this, but I'm certain of it. They're going to win.
36 hours passed like water through my fingers. When the time came, I stood on the observation deck of the human flagship, a vessel called the Unconquered Horizon, and watched the combined fleet assemble.
217 Vathari warships, the last remnants of our once proud armada, falling into formation alongside 400 human vessels of various classes. The human ships were not impressive by our standards, smaller, less heavily armed, with none of the ornate design elements that marked our capital ships. They looked functional, practical, dangerous. Ambassador, Admiral Webb appeared beside me, his uniform crisp despite the chaos of the past 2 days. Your fleet commanders have integrated with our tactical network. Coordination looks solid.
They are good officers, I said. The best we have left.
They'll need to be. Webb looked out at the assembled fleet. The plan is straightforward. Your ships form the outer perimeter, engage the absence's active elements, draw its attention, force it to commit resources to defense. Our ships punch through the center, carrying the cascade devices to the deployment coordinates. Once we're in position, we trigger the quantum disruption and
the absence dies.
the absence fragments. We'll still need to clean up the disconnected swarms afterward, but they won't be able to coordinate, won't be able to adapt. It'll be a matter of time and firepower, not existential survival. He turned to face me. Ambassador, I won't lie to you. This operation carries significant risk. We estimate a 30 to 40% casualty rate for the perimeter fleet. 30 to 40%. 60 to 80,000 Vathari lives.
They know, I said quietly. They volunteered.
So did mine. Webb's expression was unreadable. That's what soldiers do, Ambassador. They volunteer to die so others can live. It's the oldest bargain in any civilization's history. I thought of my sister again, of all the soldiers I had known over 4 centuries of life, of the burden of sending others to their deaths while you remained safe. I want to be on one of the perimeter ships, I said suddenly. Webb raised an eyebrow. With respect, Ambassador, you're a diplomat, not a warrior.
I am Vathari. My people are dying. I will not stand safely on a human vessel while they fight for our survival. I met his eyes. This is not a request, Admiral. I am going.
For a long moment he studied me. Then, slowly, he nodded. I'll have a shuttle prepared. You can transfer to your fleet's command ship before we jump. Thank you. He extended his hand, a human gesture of respect I had learned. I took it, feeling the strange warmth of his skin against my scales. Good luck, Ambassador, he said, to all of us.
We jumped.
The transit was rougher than normal. The absence's influence had disrupted the fabric of space-time across a vast region, creating turbulence that shook our ships like leaves in a storm. When we emerged, I was standing on the bridge of the Dominion vessel Hierarch's Resolve, surrounded by officers whose faces reflected the same mixture of terror and determination that I felt in my own hearts. The absence filled the view screen. I had seen recordings. I had studied the data. Nothing had prepared me for the reality. It was vast, a cloud of darkness that stretched across light years, blotting out the stars behind it. It moved with a terrible, organic fluidity, tendrils of shadow reaching out toward distant systems, drawing them in, consuming them. There was no sound in space, but looking at it, I felt I could hear a whisper, a voice at the edge of perception, hungry and patient and utterly alien. All ships, this is Admiral Webb. The human's voice crackled over the fleet-wide channel. Commence Operation Cascade. The battle began. Our perimeter ships surged forward, engaging the absence's outer elements. Weapons fire lit up the darkness, beam weapons, kinetic projectiles, nuclear detonations blooming like flowers in the void. The absence responded, tendrils of shadow whipping toward our vessels, enveloping them, dissolving them atom by atom. Ships died. Thari ships, human ships, thousands of lives snuffed out in moments. But we held, and the human strike force punched through the chaos, their vessels diving toward the heart of the swarm.
Cascade 1 in position, a voice reported. Deploying device.
A flash of light, different from the weapons fire, deeper, stranger. I felt it in my bones, in the core of my being, a vibration that seemed to resonate with the fabric of reality itself. And something changed. The absence shuddered. A section of the swarm, hundreds of thousands of kilometers across, suddenly lost cohesion. The machines that made it up began to drift, their coordinated movements dissolving into random chaos.
"It's working," Thesson breathed beside me. "The quantum disruption is working."
Cascade 2 deployed. Cascade 3 deployed. More flashes, more shudders. The absence was fragmenting, sections of it going dark, losing the terrible intelligence that had made it unstoppable.
But it fought back. The remaining coordinated elements surged toward the human strike force, recognizing the threat, trying to stop it before it was too late. A human carrier vanished, swarmed under by trillions of machines. A destroyer sacrificed itself, ramming into a tendril to clear a path for the Cascade carriers.
Cascade 4 deployed. Cascade 5. The transmission cut off. A human cruiser, carrying the fifth device, disappeared in a bloom of silent fire.
Cascade 5 is gone, someone reported. They didn't deploy. We're down to
continue the mission. Webb's voice was steady, unshaken. Cascade 6, you're clear. Make your run. A single human vessel, smaller than the others, broke from formation and accelerated toward the center of the absence. It was fast, faster than anything I had seen, weaving through tendrils and debris with impossible precision. I watched, hearts pounding, as it dove deeper and deeper into the darkness. The absence converged on it, trying to stop it, trying to consume it like it had consumed everything else. The ship didn't slow down.
"Cascade 6, you are entering critical mass zone," a voice warned. "Recommend
negative." The pilot's voice was calm, terrifyingly calm. "I'm not stopping. Tell my family I love them." The ship reached the center. The device deployed. And the universe split open. What happened next is difficult to describe. The quantum disruption cascaded outward from the deployment point, spreading through the absence's entanglement network at speeds that defied conventional physics. The connection that had bound trillions of machines into a single terrible intelligence shattered like glass. The absence died. Not all at once, not cleanly, but the coordinated swarm that had consumed worlds and fleets and billions of lives fragmented into countless disconnected clouds of inert machines. They drifted, purposeless, no longer a threat to anything. The darkness that had filled the view screen began to fade. Behind it, I could see stars. Stars that had been hidden for months, years by the swarm's bulk. Stars still burning, still waiting, still there. The bridge of the hierarch's resolve was silent. And then, slowly, someone began to weep. It spread, that weeping, across our ship, across the fleet. They Thari who had watched their families die, their worlds burn, their civilization crumble, finally allowed themselves to feel something other than despair. We had won.
Against all odds, against all probability, against an enemy that had seemed invincible, we had won.
Ambassador, Thesson's voice was thick with emotion. Ambassador, we're receiving a transmission from the human flagship.
I wiped my eyes. When had I started crying? And nodded. Put it through.
Director Chen's face appeared on the display. She looked tired. Grief was etched into her features. I would later learn that 17 human ships had been lost, over 3,000 crew members dead. But she was smiling.
Ambassador Keith Voron, she said. Congratulations. The absence is neutralized. Your home world is safe.
Thanks to you, I managed. Thanks to humanity. She shook her head. Thanks to all of us. Together. She paused. Admiral Webb is coordinating cleanup operations. It will take months to neutralize all the disconnected swarms, but the existential threat is over. The galaxy will live.
The galaxy will live, I repeated, feeling the words settle into my soul. Director Chen, I don't know how to thank you. I don't know how to repay what your people have done.
You don't have to repay us, Ambassador. Her smile widened. Just remember that we were here. Remember that we helped. And maybe the next time a small species in an unremarkable system sends out signals of greeting and friendship, maybe someone will listen.
I closed my eyes. I thought of 400 years of arrogance, 400 years of dismissal, 400 years of treating the humans as beneath our notice. They had responded by saving us.
We will remember, I said. I swear to you, Director, the Vaethari will remember.
The cleanup operations took 7 months. The absence, fragmented and mindless, was still dangerous. Clouds of machines that could consume a ship if approached carelessly. But without coordination, they were manageable. Human and Vaethari vessels worked side by side, systematically neutralizing the remnants, reclaiming the systems that had been swallowed by darkness. I returned to the Vaethari homeworld for the first time in over a year. The twin suns still rose and set, the cities still stood. Children still played in the streets, looking up at the sky without fear. The hierarch was gone. Veth Solon had died as they had promised, standing on the surface, watching the sky. When the absence came for the homeworld, they had been on the steps of the first temple, looking up at the stars. But they had not died in despair. The message they left behind spoke of hope, hope that I would succeed, that humanity would prove true to their promises, that the galaxy would have a future after all. I was offered the position of hierarch. I declined. The Dominion needed new leadership, yes, but it needed leaders who could see beyond our ancient arrogance, leaders who understood that the galaxy was changing and that we had to change with it. Instead, I became something else, something new. The first ambassador to the United Terran Republic. The humans had suggested the title. I had suggested a different one, Eternal Friend, but they had laughed and told me it was a bit much. Humans have a peculiar relationship with grandeur. They seem to find it slightly embarrassing. My first official act as ambassador was to attend the dedication of a memorial on the human world called Earth, their birthplace, the cradle of their species. The memorial commemorated the humans who had died in Operation Cascade. 3,117 names carved into black stone, overlooking an ocean that stretched to the horizon. Director Chen stood beside me as the ceremony concluded and the crowds began to disperse. "It's beautiful," I said, looking at the memorial. A fitting tribute.
It's a reminder, she replied. Every generation needs to understand what came before, the sacrifices that were made, the prices that were paid. She looked at me. We have a lot of these memorials, Ambassador, from wars that predate our spacefaring era, from disasters and tragedies across our history. We build them because we believe that memory is a form of honor.
The Vithari build monuments to our victories, I said slowly. Great towers and statues celebrating our conquests. We have never built memorials to our dead.
Maybe you should start. Chen's voice was gentle. The dead deserve to be remembered, Ambassador. Not as statistics, not as numbers in a report, as people, as individuals who had names and families and dreams.
I thought of my sister, of the billions who had died in the war with the absence, of the hierarch standing alone on the temple steps.
Yes, I said. Perhaps we should.
We stood in silence for a while, watching the sun set over the ocean. The sky turned colors that I had no words for, shades of orange and pink and purple that blended together in ways my homeworld's twin suns never produced.
Director Chen, I said, finally, I have a question.
Of course.
The Cascade weapon, the quantum disruption technology, the fleet you had prepared, the ships you had positioned. I turned to face her. You told me that you had been preparing for everything, but the Cascade was designed specifically to counter the absence. You developed it in 6 months, an impossibly short time for such a complex technology. Unless we had already been working on something similar, Chen finished. She smiled, that strange, unreadable human expression. You're asking whether we had weapons prepared for other threats as well?
Yes. She was quiet for a long moment. When she spoke, her voice was soft, almost confessional. Ambassador, humanity has spent 3 centuries preparing for the worst. We didn't know what form the threat would take. Invasion, disease, natural disaster, existential dangers we couldn't even imagine. So we prepared for everything. We built redundant systems. We developed technologies that could be adapted to multiple scenarios. We trained our people to be flexible, to think creatively, to never assume that any problem was unsolvable. She looked up at the darkening sky, where stars were beginning to appear.
The Cascade was developed in 6 months because we had already spent decades researching quantum manipulation, network disruption, adaptive weaponry. When the absence appeared, we didn't start from scratch. We took existing research and focused it on a specific target. She paused. If a different threat had emerged, a hostile fleet, a plague, an asteroid, anything else, we would have adapted our preparations to meet it. That's what humans do, Ambassador. We adapt.
And if the threat had come from us, I asked quietly, from the Dominion, if we had decided to conquer you rather than ignore you?
Chen met my eyes. Her expression was calm, but I saw something in her gaze, something old and hard and patient. Then we would have adapted to that, too. The words hung in the air between us. I understood, in that moment, what she was saying, what she was not saying.
The humans had prepared for everything, including us. For 400 years, the Dominion had dismissed humanity as primitive, insignificant, unworthy of concern. And for 400 years, the humans had watched us watching them. They had studied our technology, our tactics, our weaknesses. They had built weapons and defenses and contingency plans for the day when we might decide that they were a threat to be eliminated.
They had never stopped preparing, never stopped learning, never stopped getting stronger. And they had never told anyone. "You are terrifying," I said, and I meant it as a compliment.
Chen laughed, a genuine warm sound. "We prefer persistent. But yes, Ambassador, when you push humanity, we push back. When you try to destroy us, we find a way to survive. And when you leave us alone," she shrugged, "we grow, we learn, we prepare for the day when we might not be left alone anymore."
And now? Now we have allies. She placed a hand on my arm, a gesture of friendship, I had learned. Real allies, not subjects, not servants, partners who see us as equals and treat us accordingly. That's new for us, Ambassador. That's something worth protecting. I looked out at the memorial, at the names carved in stone. 3,000 humans who had died to save a civilization that had never shown them anything but contempt.
We dared to ignore you, I said slowly. For 4 centuries, we treated you as insignificant, beneath notice, not worth the effort of a single diplomatic message.
Yes. And when we finally came to you, desperate and broken and begging for help, you saved us. Yes. Why? I shook my head. You've told me before. Compassion, ideals, hope. But there must be more to it. Some practical calculation, some strategic benefit. Ambassador, Chen's voice was firm. Do you know what the most dangerous thing in the universe is?
I hesitated. The absence?
No. The absence was a machine. Dangerous, yes, but predictable. Once we understood it, we could counter it. She looked up at the stars again. The most dangerous thing in the universe is a species that has been pushed too far, a species that has nothing left to lose, a species that has been hurt so badly that it stops caring about anything except revenge. I thought of the absence, created by some forgotten civilization as a weapon of last resort, still consuming the galaxy millions of years after its creators had turned to dust.
We saved you, Chen continued, because we didn't want the Vathari to become that species. We didn't want billions of your people to die in agony while we stood by and watched. We didn't want the survivors to remember for 1,000 generations that humanity had the power to help and chose not to. She met my eyes. We saved you because it was the right thing to do.
But also because the alternative, a galaxy full of species who had learned that humanity would let them burn, was too dangerous to contemplate. I understood. Finally, completely, I understood. The humans were not naive. They were not idealistic fools who believed in universal brotherhood. They were pragmatists who had learned, through millennia of bloody history, that the most effective way to survive in a dangerous universe was to make allies rather than enemies, to build trust rather than fear, to offer hope rather than despair. They had saved us, not because they were kind, but because they were wise. And that made them more terrifying than any weapon they could have built. I am old now. 463 standard cycles, ancient even by Vathari standards. I have seen the rise of the alliance that replaced the Dominion, a partnership of species, human and Vathari and a dozen others, working together in ways that would have been unthinkable a century ago. I have seen the memorials built on our homeworld, honoring the dead of the Absence War. I have seen human children playing alongside Vathari children, neither species fearing the other. I have seen trade routes and research stations and diplomatic missions that span the galaxy. And I have seen the humans continue to grow. They do not boast, They do not threaten. They do not use their power to dominate or control. They simply exist, patient and calm, and utterly, terrifyingly capable. When problems arise, they offer solutions. When conflicts emerge, they mediate. When threats appear on the horizon, they prepare. Always preparing, always adapting, always growing stronger. The galaxy has learned, slowly, what the Vathari learned in the fire of the Absence War. The humans are not to be underestimated. They are not to be dismissed. They are not to be challenged. Because the species that challenges humanity does not defeat them. They become them. I think often of the title of my final report to the hierarchy, written in the weeks after Operation Cascade. The council archivists asked me for a summary, a phrase that would capture the essence of what had happened, what I had learned, what the galaxy needed to understand. I chose 6 words. They have become the standard warning taught to every young diplomat, every military commander, every politician who considers humanity's role in galactic affairs. They are carved into the base of the memorial on Earth, beneath the names of the dead. They are whispered in corridors of power across 100 worlds, a reminder and a prophecy. 6 words that explain why humanity will never again be ignored. 6 words that contain the entire history of a species, forged in struggle and refined by survival. 6 words that the galaxy, in its arrogance, had to learn the hard way. They dared humanity. The galaxy paid. And now, as I stand at the window of my quarters overlooking the twin suns of my homeworld, still burning, still warming the faces of children who will never know the fear we knew, I understand something that took me a lifetime to learn. The stars do not remember us. This remains true. They burn in silence, indifferent to our struggles, our triumphs, our failures. They will continue burning long after the last of us has returned to dust. But we remember each other. That is the gift the humans gave us in the end. Not just survival, not just victory, but the understanding that memory itself is a form of immortality, that the civilizations we build, the alliances we forge, the kindnesses we offer to species we have never met, these things outlast stars. The humans remember their grandmother, killed by our patrol ships 4 centuries ago. They remember the 3,000 who died in Operation Cascade. They remember every sacrifice, every loss, every moment of pain that forged them into what they are. And they remember us. Not as the arrogant empire that ignored them, not as the desperate supplicants who came begging for help, but as partners, as allies, as friends who learned, finally, that the measure of a civilization is not the power it wields, but the compassion it shows. I will die soon. My body is failing, worn out by centuries of service. But I am not afraid. I have seen the future that the humans and the Vathari will build together. I have seen the memorial stones and the playing children and the trading ships moving between stars that once seemed impossibly distant. And I know, with the certainty that only comes at the end of a long life, that humanity will remember me. As I will remember them. Forever.